I love Elden Ring, and I love the lore of Elden Ring, so I thought I'd make a video on some characters. Hello everyone, hope you're all doing great. I'm Pebble, this is Boss Fog, and welcome to Elden Ring Lore in 3 minutes or less Season 1. What a mouthful. In this video, I'm going to be covering 7 different characters within the world of Elden Ring, all within 3 minutes or less. I don't go in depth on these characters as that's impossible to do in 3 minutes, but they're fun little bite-sized clips giving a general overview of each character and their histories. If you have any lore insights about any of the characters, feel free to comment them down below. I love reading them. And if you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, it'd mean a lot to me. But now, without further ado, sit back, relax, grab a drink, and let's get into it. Ronnie was born to Radagon and Rennala being the Queen of Caria, and Radagon a supporter of the Golden Order. She was the third of their children, with her siblings being Radahn and Rykard. When Radagon kicked Rennala to the curb in favor of Marika, Ronnie and her siblings were raised to demigods within the Golden Order. Ronnie was an Empyrean, a being capable of becoming the vessel for a god, and was given a shadow-bound beast named Blaidd to protect her. She would also encounter an old crone in the woods who taught her all about cold sorceries. Ronnie didn't really like having her fate decided, however, so she orchestrated the Knight of Black Knives, stealing a fragment of the Rune of Death and having Black Knife assassins slay her half-brother Godwyn, while she seppuku'd herself, releasing her soul and abandoning her Empyrean flesh, with her later inhabiting a doll. She hung around the Lands Between until the Tarnished happened upon her. After giving the Tarnished the wolf ashes, they encounter her again at the Three Sisters, entering the Tarnished into her service. She sent the player character on some quests to help her achieve her goals, including defeating Radahn to release the stars, slaying Blaidd after he goes insane, and gaining the Fingerslayer blade, wherein she uses it on the 2 fingers below the Cathedral of Manus Celis to sever her ties to the Greater Will and make her fate her own. She also gives us the Moonlight Greatsword, which is just terrific. If the player chooses to summon her at the end, she replaces Marika as the god of the Lands Between and ushers in the Age of Stars, removing the Elden Ring from the Lands Between and beginning a 1,000-year journey through the stars, ridding the Lands Between of the meddling of the Greater Will. The Putrescent Knight is an intriguing character that can be encountered in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC at the bottom of the Stone Coffin Fissure. Long ago, the impure bodies within the stone coffins were burned with ghost flame, the death ritual in an age long past. Over the ages, this ghostly flame-tainted flesh would eventually converge in these coffins, or drip down into the chasm below, and coalesce into a new form of life, putrescence. I like to think of this whole process as similar to how stalagmites and stalactites are made in caves, with the putrescence slowly leaking from these coffins, and forming beings below over many millennia in the dark depths of the stone coffin fissure. Eventually, after countless years, the Putrescent Knight would rise from this putrid mass of liquefied flesh. However, the Putrescent Knight was restless, as were the other amalgamations of putrescence, not being able to find peace in death. When Michel made his journey to the Lands of Shadow, divesting himself of everything, he cast Saint Trina, his other half, down into the stone coffin fissure, losing his compassion and love in the process. The area Saint Trina landed in, known as the Garden of Deep Purple, would bloom with flowers of purple and white, with the area around Saint Trina sprouting the Nectarblood Burgeon flower. The Putrescent Knight would drink from these flowers, which gave it rest. And so it came to serve Saint Trina, protecting her at all costs. It should also be noted that there's quite a few similarities between Saint Trina and the Putrescent Knight, and Michel and Radahn, specifically Star-Scourge Radahn, with their reliance on their steeds for travel due to not having legs in the Knight's case, and the fact that Radahn doesn't have legs when we encounter him in Caelid, drawing a pretty interesting parallel. When the Tarnished happened upon the stone coffin fissure, they encounter the Putrescent Knight at the bottom of the chasm, where it emerges and engages us in battle. After a frankly infuriating fight, the Putrescent Knight falls, opening up the way to Saint Trina. Mesmer was a child of Queen Marika the Eternal, while his father is not mentioned, but we can assume it was Radagon as, like Malenia and Michel, he was cursed. Whether from birth or through his mother Marika's schemes, Mesmer was the host for a malignant entity known as the Abyssal Serpent, a being of great and terrible power. Marika feared it, so she replaced her son's right eye with a seal of grace to hold the serpent in check. From an early age, Mesmer was accompanied by two winged serpents which coiled around his body, offering wise counsel as well as suppressing the power of the Abyssal Serpent. Mesmer also bore a vision of fire, much like his supposed sister Melina, which manifested in an item called Mesmer's Kindling, but he hated this flame and wished to be rid of it. This flame would later be used to channel Mesmer fire incantations. In his youth, Mesmer would become friends with an Albinoric named Gaius who, like Mesmer, was born cursed, without the use of his legs in his case. They also formed a bond with another demigod, Radon, and they acted as older brothers to him. Before the events of Elden Ring, Queen Marika charged Mesmer with journeying to the Land of Shadow to carry out a great purge of the Hornsent living there, as they lived outside of Grace. Mesmer carried out this campaign relentlessly, putting Hornsent to the sword all in the hopes of pleasing his mother. But Marika had other ideas, and so, whether to keep the Abyssal Serpent away or for some other reason, she abandoned her son in the Lands of Shadow, ceasing contact with him. This didn't shake Mesmer's resolve, however, and he continued to purge the Hornsent for his mother. He would make his base in the Shadow Keep and conducted his atrocities from there. All wasn't well in his army, however, who found out about his serpentine nature and disagreed with his destruction of runes and relics, and so many of them mutinied, with Mesmer entombing the leaders of this mutiny, Andreas and his son Hugh, whom he mourned. When the Tarnished encounters Mesmer, he is in his chambers in the Shadow Keep in darkness. His serpents tell him that a Tarnished has arrived, and he rises to face them, not forgetting his duty to destroy those shunned by gold. This Tarnished is strong, however, so in a last-ditch effort to defeat them, he rips out the seal Marika put in his eye and unleashes the Abyssal Serpent. This still isn't enough, however, and he is defeated, cursing his mother with his last breath for abandoning him. Metar was the daughter of the Greater Will, being the first of all meteorites to hit the lands between from the cosmos, predating the Elden Beast. She was an unsettling mass of fingers, with a small, wart-like eye that fired projectiles and a spiral tail made up of two fingers. Clutched between her tail appendages, she held a microcosm which allowed her to communicate with the Greater Will, receiving its guidance and instructions. She would give birth to the Two Fingers, who would then become revered and respected envoys for the Greater Will, and within the Golden Order. She also, more likely than not, birthed the Three Fingers, with them being corrupted by the Flames of Frenzy at a later date. At some point in the past, Metar would lose the ability to communicate with the Greater Will, possibly from being attacked by an unknown assailant and having her ringed finger severed, with the ringed finger club weapon stating that it had been cut off from an ancestor of the Finger Creepers. Following this event, Metar and her two-finger offspring would guide the people of the Lands Between without the input of the Greater Will, essentially making the entirety of the Golden Order a sham, and the Two Fingers false prophets. Upon losing the guidance of Grace, Metar would give birth to the Finger Creepers, an aggressive race of fingers who were significantly more savage than the Two Fingers who came before them. Metar would then flee to the Finger Ruins of Meyer, birthing more Finger Creepers, and waiting for a sign from the Greater Will, a sign that would never come. Upon encountering Metar, below the Cathedral of Manus Metar, she is covered in grotesque, fingery wounds and a massive gash in her chest for birthing Finger Creepers, and she attacks. But, as you know, she's no match for the Tarnished, even with all her summoned children, and upon defeat, a microcosm opens up, and she leaves through it to parts unknown. Did she flee to another area of the Lands Between, or did the Greater Will beckon her home, finally contacting her after countless years? That's for you to decide. Michel was born to Queen Marika the Eternal and Radagon, along with his twin sister, Melania. Since his parents were in fact the same being, Michel and his sister were born cursed, with Michel being afflicted with perpetual youth, doomed to never age. He was known as the fiercest Empyrean for his ability to compel and charm others into loving him, often forcefully to further his own ends. Like his parents, Michel had a dual personality, with his other self being Saint Trina, who embodied his love and was heavily associated with sleep, being well regarded by the people of the lands between as a comforting presence in their dreams. Michel would delve into Golden Order fundamentalism, searching for a cure for him and his sister, as well as a way to grant Godwyn the Golden a true death, creating numerous spells and contraptions, but when it didn't yield the results he wanted, he abandoned it, losing faith in the Golden Order, and seeking to rid the lands between of gods, wishing to ascend himself and bring forth an age of compassion. He then tampered with unalloyed gold, forging a needle that staved off the influence of outer gods, halting Melania's scarlet rot. He would also grow the Halig tree, a safe space for those shunned by gold, watering it with his Empyrean blood and seeking to grow to adulthood within. At some point during all these events, he would make a pact with Radahn wherein Radahn would become his consort once he achieved godhood, in return for something unspecified. Whilst in the Halig tree, he would charm Mohg into kidnapping his body, using Mohg to gain access to the Land of Shadow. Once there, he would strip himself of his fate, his flesh, his great rune, his lineage, his love, and his compassion, which manifested as Saint Trina, in turn losing himself and who he was, and made for the gate of divinity, intending to raise himself to godhood. He took Mohg's body, using it as a vessel for Radahn's soul, and resurrected him as his consort. When the Tarnished arrives, Radahn is at full strength and attacks. Halfway through the fight, Michel descends from the Gate of Divinity, having ascended to godhood, and joins the fight against us, asking that we yield the path forward to him and his order. We don't, and Michel is defeated, the Age of Compassion unfulfilled. Naniah is one of the most mysterious and intriguing characters in Elden Ring, with a backstory that can be viewed in multiple ways. We know that she was the Lady of Midra, a sage who delved into the maddening depths of the Frenzied Flame, attempting to become its lord. The Hornsent of the Land of Shadow found out about this treachery, which was a grave crime in their culture, and raided Midra's manse, destroying everything and everyone they came across. They subdued Midra, and subjected him to a damnation like no other. They impaled him with the Great Sword of Damnation, which opened up in golden arcs in his body and caused him unimaginable agony. It was during this torment that Naniah entreated Midra to do one thing: endure. This is an interesting word, endure. Why would a wife want their husband to go through such pain? Well, that's because Naniah isn't all she appears to be. This next part is my own speculation, so feel free to disagree or add to it in the comments. I believe that Naniah is Shabriri in disguise, and there's quite a bit of evidence supporting this. If we take the description of Naniah's torch, which reads, "In a distant land, in an age long past, was born a man who failed to become the Lord of Frenzied Flame. All that remains of him is cradled gently by Naniah." We can assume that Naniah has been on a quest of sorts to find a being strong enough to inherit the Frenzied Flame, which is identical to Shabriri's goals, and so cradles the last failure prior to Midra. It could also be one of Midra's spinal columns, but I choose to believe it's another failed lord. There's also the unsettling painting of Midra and Naniah. If we look closely, she has a sinister smirk creeping over her face, not unlike the Shabriri's woe talisman, and her eyes are obscured from view, mirroring Shabriri's covering of his eyes, leaving only an eerie outline. The Lord of Frenzied Flame is supposed to use their torment, despair, affliction, and every negative emotion, and channel it into the Frenzied Flame, becoming stronger the more they suffer. So it would make sense for Naniah/Shabriri to tell Midra to endure in this regard to make him as strong as possible. On the other hand, Naniah could also be viewed in a more tragic light. She could be a maiden of the Three Fingers, searching for a lord who could inherit the Frenzied Flame. She met Midra, convinced him to pursue the Frenzied Flame, and possibly fell in love with him, as in the painting she appears to be holding her stomach as if she's pregnant with his child. She could have told him to endure out of love for the Frenzied Flame, or she could have had second thoughts about it after witnessing the destruction of her home and torture of her husband, and told him to endure to keep the Frenzied Flame at bay. Whatever her motives, Naniah's story ends with her seated in a chair in the Midra's manse library, clutching a small spinal column of unknown origin. Is it Midra's, another failed lord's, or even her child? We may never know. She was born as a Newman in the shaman village in the Land of Shadow, and had a maternal figure known as grandmother. Early in her life, the Hornsent would learn of the shaman's unique ability to meld or graft well with others, So they did the most logical thing they could think of. They stuffed the shamans into jars to try and create saints. No, it's not weird, shut up. At some point, Marika was recognized as an Empyrean by the Two Fingers and was given a shadow, Malekith, to protect her. She came into conflict with the Gloam-Eyed Queen during this time, another Empyrean, with Malekith defeating her, consolidating Marika's power. She ascended to godhood at the Gate of Divinity, removing destined death and becoming the vessel for the Elden Ring, establishing the Golden Order and creating the Erd Tree and Shadow Tree, which the Hornsent found to be a grave betrayal. Wonder if it has anything to do with the countless bodies here. At this point, she went looking for a consort, choosing Godfrey, with whom she had 3 children, Morgott and Moog the Omens, and Godwyn the Golden. The newlyweds then went about in a good old-fashioned purge, driving the fire giants to the brink of extinction, enslaving the misbegotten, and shunning anyone who didn't fit into their Golden Order clique. With their enemies subdued, Marika booted Godfrey and his brethren out of the lands between and stripped them of grace, leaving him nothing in the divorce settlement. This is where Radagon comes in. He left his wife Rennala and became Marika's consort, raising his children to demigod status in the process. But Marika and Radagon had a secret. Dun da da da! They were the same person. No, it's still not weird. Bit of speculation here. I think Marika's shaman melding/grafting abilities allowed her to conjoin with Radagon. No, I won't go into it more. Together they had 2 official children, Melania and Miquella, both Empyreans, and 2 heavily implied to be children, Mesmer and Melina. Speaking of Mesmer, she would send him to purge and slaughter the Hornsent in the Land of Shadow during this time, and abandoned him there. Great mother. All was well until the Night of Black Knives, when her stepdaughter/daughter Ronnie orchestrated the Night of Black Knives and slew Godwyn the Golden. This broke Marika, and she shattered the Elden Ring, tasking her children with fighting over the runes to see who could become Elden Lord. The Greater Will would imprison her in the Erd Tree for her crimes. She then hung around for a long while until a Tarnished arrived in the Erd Tree. Radagon then takes over to face us, not liking that his wife shattered the Elden Ring, but he's defeated, as is the Elden Beast. Depending on the ending, the player has the option to then become Marika's consort. 3rd time's the charm, right? And the game ends. And that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry I haven't uploaded a full-length video recently. I've just been trying to get a footing in Australia right now. You know, car, getting a job, all that boring stuff. I've been working on these shorter videos because they take less time to do, but rest assured, there are numerous full-length videos coming out soon. But anyway, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.